Welcome to the Rail News Network in Baltimore. I'm Kim Brown. The Trump administration on Wednesday ordered a review of tough U.S. vehicle fuel efficiency standards put in place by the Obama administration, handing a victory to auto industry executives and provoking criticism from Democrats and environmental groups. Here's what Trump had to say at an event Wednesday afternoon outside of Detroit in Ypsilanti, Michigan, attended by auto industry executives and workers in a setting that underscored his efforts to lock down support in industrial states such as Michigan that put him in the White House in the first place.
I'm sure you've all heard the big news that we're going to work on the CAFE standards so you can make cars in America again. We're going to help the companies and they're going to help you. We're setting up a task force in every federal agency to identify and remove any regulation that undermines American auto production and any other kind of production. Under this system, we will reduce burdens on our companies and on our businesses. But in exchange, companies must hire and grow in America. They have to hire and grow in our country. That is how we will succeed and grow together. American workers and American industry side by side.
The CAFE standards that he's talking about are the Corporate Average Fuel Economy Standards, which are the regulations first enacted by the United States Congress back in 1975 after the Arab oil embargo of 1973-74 to improve the average fuel economies of cars and other vehicles that are produced here in America. And with us to help unpack whether rolling back these regulations will help American auto workers, the American public, or just the car manufacturers, we are joined today by two guests, Frank Hammer and Andrew Lindhart. Now, Frank is a retired General Motors employee and former president and chairman of Local 909 in Warren, Michigan. He now organizes with the Autoworkers Caravan, which is an association of both active and retired auto workers who advocate for workers' demands in Washington. He's on the line from Detroit. And Andrew Lindhart is an associate director for federal advocacy with the Sierra Club, where he served as a lobbyist with the federal policy team. He works on issues ranging from domestic work on fuel economy in ethanol to international issues such as reforming IFIs and international trade moving beyond coal. So, gentlemen, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Frank, let's start with you. So, could the rollback on emissions regulations actually lead to more American jobs in the auto industry?
Well, when I testified in 2012 to the EPA on behalf of Jobs with Justice here in Detroit, it was very clear that the argument for the new stiffer regulations were an increase in jobs. So I don't know how rolling them back will increase jobs when in fact the argument was just the other way around. Having the higher thresholds was a job creator.
Well, Frank, okay, let me ask the question a different way. Would rolling back these standards, these new standards, relatively new, put in place by the Obama administration, I guess maybe the question is, was it costly to auto manufacturers to enact these better fuel efficiency standards put in place by Barack Obama?
Well, I think that the auto companies typically complain every time they were required to make either their cars safer, or in this case, safer for the environment by having better fuel efficiencies. And they will complain bitterly about how expensive it is. But we have to realize that General Motors, especially coming out of the bankruptcy, has been making billions of dollars a year. And that's with the introduction of the electric car, with higher efficiencies as mandated by the Obama administration. So I don't know that this isn't just a red herring, that behind all this is oil companies that are very happy for their vehicles to not be fuel efficient. And I think it's a red herring, and I think it's a way of not having to make the investments that are necessary to address the question, for example, of climate change by reducing the greenhouse gases.
However, did American consumers feel any pinch of the purse or of the wallet after these new fuel efficiency standards were enacted? Did the price of American-produced cars actually go up as a result?
Well, the prices of the vehicles have gone up. And for example, on an SUV, the prices are quite high because General Motors, for example, the company I used to work for, is making $10,000 on a vehicle. So I don't know how much that increase is due to the new technologies or how much it is based on what the market will bear. And they know that these vehicles that are not climate friendly are selling, and they're making a hefty profit on them. So they're apparently able to absorb the costs. The standards are not as stringent on the SUVs as they are on standard vehicles. But I think the argument, it's an argument of, oh, we want to make it cheaper for the consumer, but I don't think anybody really expects that the prices of the vehicles will go down if these standards are rolled back.
So, Andrew, I wanted to ask, I mean, the original impetus for the CAFE standards was the 73-74 Arab oil embargo to save on gas consumption by Americans. So talk about how this has grown in importance from a climate change as well as a public health perspective.
Sure. So as we all know, CO2 is the leading cause of climate change. And transportation has just recently overtaken the power sector in the United States as the highest emitter of carbon dioxide pollution. And so we need to be able to work towards, regulating the emissions coming out of that, which the Obama administration did when they lined up with all the auto manufacturers in the Rose Garden back in 2009 to agree to these new standards that would cut oil use and CO2 emissions while saving people money. So it's really grown in importance, and that is why the EPA, before the Obama administration left office, decided that its technical review supported its decision to keep the standards as is, going through the 22 through 25 period. So it's grown in importance, and it's continued. Its importance needs to continue going forward in the future.
So, Andrew, how much do American cars and other vehicles contribute to the total greenhouse gas emissions globally?
It's a significant amount. I don't know the exact percentage right off the top of my head, but America is the historic polluter when it comes to CO2, even though we've been passed by China more recently on a yearly basis. So you have to go back and look at those numbers, but it is not a small amount, and the U.S. can lead the way in reducing these emissions both here and set an example for the world.
So this next question is to you both, but Frank, you can take it first. So talk about what happened under the Obama administration in terms of further reduction of emissions from vehicles. So how significant were the new regulations or the regulations put into place by Barack Obama and now with Donald Trump pledging to rescind them?
I believe that the fuel efficiency has gone up to, on a fleet-wide level, I think they're 25 miles per gallon, up from, I think, 20. And by the way, I think I have a figure for the previous question. I think the estimation about the transportation sector is like anywhere between 20, 25% of greenhouse emissions. So I think that gives you a sense of what that figure is. So there's no question that the vehicles produced by the big three and others have in fact become more efficient. And I should note that the standards in other countries are actually even higher than ours in terms of fuel efficiency. So for us to attempt to roll those back would be retrograde compared to other countries and the efficiencies that they're establishing in their countries for the cars that are sold in their markets.
Andrew, your thoughts on President Obama's regulations on improving the fuel efficiency standards? Was it significant, insignificant? Could he have done more?
Well, I think we would say that we could always do more, but I don't want to undersell how important the rules that the Obama administration put in place on this. We've seen record growth in the auto manufacturer sales, while at the same time their entire fleets and all their cars are getting more and more efficient, and Americans are saving money at the pump. So it's certainly not a small amount. I would say that in order to really tackle the global warming crisis that we're going to face over the next several decades, we're going to have to go even further. But certainly what the Obama administration did was an excellent first step going forward.
So could, as Trump says, lessening the regulations on the emission lead automakers to produce more cars in the U.S.? So who will win and who will lose if these regulations get rolled back? And is Donald Trump even making any sense on this issue? So do improving or lessening regulations have anything to do with productivity coming out of the factories?
Well, we would argue that increasing them has increased the workers, the amount of people employed both directly by the manufacturers and then by the supply chains. The supply chains have done huge amounts of innovative growth in meeting these fuel standards, and they are hiring the people to work in those factories. So, no, we don't buy into this line that rolling them back will lead to any more jobs in the United States. We need to be a leader in clean technology, more fuel-efficient internal combustion cars, hybrids, and electrics. Make those here. Make those in union shops across the United States. And rolling these back are not going to lead to some sort of miracle job increase.
So, Frank, can you talk a little bit about that, about electric vehicles and other trends? I mean, are these both in American worker and the public's interest to go in this direction?
Well, you know, as an auto worker, I share the same environment that everybody else does. And we have to be very concerned about the increasing chaos in our weather. And it would seem to me that whether it's auto worker or not, that we have to consider what are we doing to the planet by virtue of using, inefficient inefficient automobiles in regards to the fuel consumption and the CO2 emissions that result that impact global warming and then come back to us in the form of this wicked weather that we've been seeing all over the globe. And we just saw in New England just the other day, we have all these records that are continuously being broken. Either too cold or way too hot and droughts, etc. So I think as a conscientious workers looking to the future, we have to promote electric. And that's what's being done, for example, in California. California is going to be a real challenge because they have these waivers that enable them to even go more efficient and to produce electric vehicles, which everybody pretty much understands is going to be the future. And you see companies like Tesla that are leading this charge to electrify automobiles. So I think that there's other avenues that we have to approach about jobs. For example, our productivity as auto workers has increased 2, 3, 4-fold, and we should be reaping the rewards of that with fewer hours worked and more workers on the line.
So, gentlemen, I mean, to you both, what's coming up next on this? Because on Wednesday, the EPA sent out a press release saying that they would, quote, re-examine emission standards for cars and light-duty trucks, model years 2022 to 2025, end quote, and that they are to be revisited. So the midterm evaluation process. So talk about that and what that could mean for fuel efficiency standards for newer cars going forward.
So I'll jump in on that quickly. If they are honest in doing their midterm review and follow the technology and what the data says, they will reach the same conclusion that the Obama administration reached. And I would also point out that when the EPA under President Obama made this final decision back in January, the administrator said that there was certainly an argument that could be made that these standards could have been strengthened according to the technical record. So we expect, I would hope, that they would still reach the same conclusion because that is what the numbers show. The technical assessment report was thorough, and the auto manufacturers had a ton of input into it. They were consulted. And the folks that did it are professional. They know what they're doing. They're able to run the numbers, able to run the technical aspects of the engines that they examined, and the technology that exists in the marketplace now, and some guesses about what's coming forward in the future. So I think that while we will monitor closely and be ready to fight if they weaken it, if they're honest to what the record shows, they should find that these standards should be continued on the 22 through 25 side.
Frank, your thoughts about that?
So I think we have to contextualize that question in the question of what they're doing with the EPA. And Trump has made it very clear that Bannon, that they want to dismantle regulations that have been put in place that are in the interest of the broad public, and want to go to totally unfettered companies that can do whatever they want to produce a maximum amount of profit. And so this is only one piece of that. And then along with that, of course, is the whole question of climate change denial. And so this is all in keeping with that. And the companies, of course, are just, head over heels over Trump wanting to liberate them from making more fuel-efficient cars and letting them make greater profits, as well as the oil industry, of course.
Indeed. Well, gentlemen, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us. Frank Hammer and Andrew Lindhart, we appreciate you guys speaking about this, and we will certainly be monitoring everything that the Trump administration does as it pertains to climate change, or what they don't do as it pertains to climate change and the environment. So, gentlemen, we appreciate you both speaking with us today.
Thank you very much.
And thank you guys and everyone at home for watching the Real News Network.